It wasn't my intention to do this. I was going to just tack on a few brief words at the beginning of this next scenario, which is, I don't remember what it is. It's the optional rules and other scenario notes. It's the Army of the Orient scenario for the Egyptian campaign. Now, this is just like they made a whole inset in the map and everything only to handle this, which feels a little weird to me. It's obvious that it's not like Empires in Arms. We're not going to be able to handle the Egyptian campaign in other ways in other places. This reminds me of the Nations in Arms, which I think had a similar kind of thing. I think this game is attempting to compete with that for some strange reason. Now, I kind of understand why, because Nations in Arms and this are both hex-based, look like they're more operational at about the same scale. The truth of the matter is, Nation in Arms has no real reason to be using hexes. This game does, as we saw with the manipulation in the Italian campaign. There is some weird stuff going on, there is some interesting stuff going on where you can manipulate your forces and do neat things with them. Not the stuff that they talk about in here, because that doesn't seem to have any relevance to the rules. Like, you'd have to make up new shit to make that thing make sense. I think that's what, I've seen articles about, I've seen this kind of thing discussed before with the old game, and I would just look at it and say, yeah, you can't do that. And it's true, you just can't. And I think they're by McLaughlin, actually. Don't have... Well... No, this is just, yeah. The rules haven't really changed, and unless I've never understood anything, and just can't understand them, because I read, and that is not how the game works, as described in the rule book. And I think this actually comes from McLaughlin, that little piece there. So, somehow or another, the game has never been expressed properly. I don't know. Anyway, the naval rules used to be, and they're still included just in the Grand Campaign scenario, but they're necessary for an option to play this other scenario. And although they don't take up a hell of a lot of space, the original rules... call it 5 columns, and they're not much larger here. They do expand some of the description of it. It was very loosely described in, that's a fairly detailed set of rules, or amount of rules, right? But I don't know how clear they were, and I think I kind of made things up that were too easy when I played it before. I started reading these and I'm like, oh my God, what the hell's going on? Well, they did add some things, or maybe clarified stuff in ways that I'm like, is that how they mean you're playing this? Oh my God, that's weird. And maybe not that, I don't know. It's very cumbersome. This game adds this global naval movement section. I don't know what that's going to do within the Grand Campaign game. Unless there's something where you're interfering in India. Obviously, the war with the U.S. would make some sense. But why would you sail out and play around in the Caribbean or something like that? Well, it's a place you can hide your navy, I guess. But it seems like a kind of weird thing for a game that's focused on the European conflict. And I always felt like the naval rules Well, I felt like they were relatively light, but they're not really in the original. Anyway, let's take a look at what we got here. So we got two different types of naval units. There are some differences and some additions to this. The naval units themselves are squadrons, and we'll see that this term gets misused. Well, gets used in ways that disturb me, and maybe I don't get. And transport ships, and then you have fleet markers that you can aggregate them. Those are new. Also new is on the back of these ships, but not the fleets. On the back of the ships, they have a damaged side. Now, let me see the transports. Do they as well? They do not. They're sunk or captured by certain specific roles. We also have the naval tables, a naval combat result table, which looks similar to the land combat result. And actually, the system is relatively similar. A strength point of the smaller force compared to a loss value. The loss values are of a different nature, but okay. And they tell you something. Somehow we have an attrition table baked into this as well. Okay. I don't remember seeing that. And the weather table is other parts of the rules. And that's all we see there. Okay. I did read these. I've been struggling my way through them. They're particularly painful, but they were particularly painful in the original, and maybe left some stuff out because I am, looking at this and saying, oh. Okay. The squadrons are your combat ships. The Ts, the transports, are for just moving troops. Austria and Prussia don't have navies. Denmark, Portugal, and Sweden do as minors. So only England and France are allowed to build new navies, but everyone else is allowed to replace ones that go into the force pool. Okay? Oh, by the way, I had somebody come up with... So the main rule book is SG, and this is GCG. If we look here, it's Grand Campaign Scenario. I would have called it something else, but, well, I don't know. But they do say Grand Campaign Game here, which is an interesting hint. And somebody did point out that. Now, this other one just says War and Peace. It's got standard game rules. So I think the G, I think that's standard game and Grand Campaign game. They don't bother to explain this, And I mean, as soon as you realize which book is which, GCG I never had a problem with because I kind of understood what they were talking about, but I didn't make that connection. So, I'm stupider. But anyway, let's get back in. Here we go. Naval units can suffer attrition while at sea. If the attrition, so you make a die roll for the normal attrition. If the die roll is an unmodified 6 and the rolling player had any units at sea, they take attrition. They can take attrition. You roll a die for each sea zone containing naval units of the rolling player. If they get a 5 or greater, so here you get one die roll to say the weather's bad enough attrition might happen, and then you start rolling for each fleet specifically. And this does make sense because it wouldn't just be weird weather is causing an issue. It's the weird weather that's generating the attrition on land is also affecting the sea situation. And now you've got a sea because the effect can be relatively hefty. You look on the naval attrition table, cross-referencing the strength points, and then you take damaged as the number of ships that are listed there. Damage means flipping ships over. They'll have to go back home, repair. This actually costs them points. This, I think, is all new. I don't remember attrition being in here. They will never suffer attrition. So, like I said, they've expanded the rules a little bit. And the damaged markers, there were no damaged markers on the old one. I don't think ships were damaged. I think they were either sunk or captured in combat. Okay. Now, if a ship takes 2 damage on it, it's sunk. All naval units have a movement allowance of 4 movement points. That's the same. Naval units can be moved individually or as part of a stack. Now, what's interesting about them is you're going to have interceptions and stuff, so it actually matters what order you move things in. They can only enter sea zones. Sea zones are divided by these dashed white lines. They also have these circles in them, which correspond to the circles over here. What are they telling me? Yeah, I don't know. It says here, modifier for stationary interception. Yeah, it's the plus. Yeah, these are the +1 boxes for searching. Okay. I'm almost out of battery here, so. And my eye is bugging me. I have a lot of problems right now. My eye is bugging me. Nothing to do with being hit, I think. I don't know. But it is that eye. Also, my computer just suffered another problem, and one that I'm worried might be something in the motherboard. Or it might, right now my hope is that it's some sort of malware that got on my machine. I've got an antivirus, but not the one I used to have, and I had trusted it, but I don't know if it's being very good right now. So I'm running a scan. I don't know. But basically, my mouse is not working right. And I've switched mice out. I've done a lot of things. Basically, I have to do a Control-Alt-Delete to get my mouse to work properly, and I'll do it once. And it's like not interacting, like with browser and taskbar stuff and stuff like that. It's having real problems. It's like it's not interacting properly or at all, depending. And it's giving kind of inconsistent behavior, but I'm beginning to see a pattern as to what happens when where. Like sometimes I can click on something multiple times and there's not an issue, but then the issue reoccurs. Usually it's I get one free click, but not always. So it's like, wow, I don't know what's going on with it. Anyway, like I said, I have to swap batteries. I saw a computer I was interested in over on Newegg, and it's still around, but it was significantly off on like much cheaper and a pretty good machine. And I thought about buying it, and then I'm like, yeah, you know, but I've got a machine that's good enough. Not the old one that I use all the time, my wife's one, that's really good enough for everything except this one stupid project that I have in mind, or playing any really high-end games. And actually, maybe if I stuck the graphics card, that's a liberal term. Once upon a time, it was like just a little graphics card, right? Now it's like this fucking thing with two big fans running on it, and it's just huge and everything. But I don't know if the power source in my wife's machine can handle the graphics card that I have in my old machine. But like if I put that in hers, I might be able to run a stripped down version of what I was going to do. Anyway, what we got here? Naval units in a combined fleet can be dropped off or divided. You can also pick them up. I don't know if it's saying that here. If they haven't moved before, you can pick them up, but they're limited to the movement of the group that you're moving with. And you really need to do that in this as opposed to the ground game because of the interceptions and everything. Now, if you recall, one of the problems that I've always had with point-to-point games and area games to some extent is that, but point-to-point generally tends to be worse. Like Empires in Arms doesn't have this issue. You move in and you attack someone. But the point-to-point games generally have complex rules about interceptions and everything. Well, these naval rules have always been kind of like that. All right. Naval units from Russia or Sweden may not form a combined fleet with any other major or minor power. Sweden can become a satellite state of Russia and then can form combined fleets with the Russians. Naval units, this I don't think used to be there. I used to use, and in Napoleon, in Nations in Arms, I totally was doing this. Russian and Swedish fleets were like trying to prevent the invasion of Britain, combining with other allied fleets. Naval units may only enter sea zones. Sea zones are divided between coastal and non-coastal hexes. Any hex which is partially covered by a blue sea color is considered a coastal hex. There are two exceptions, London and Bordeaux, which are pushed in from the coast, are still considered coastal hexes. And what's more is they directly connect to the sea. You don't have to sail, and I don't think that was specified in the old one. You don't have to sail along the coast to get into them, which is a big deal, actually. Okay, the sea zones on the main map have a big sea area, but also this little circle, whereas the sea zones on the main on the global map have just the circles connected to one another. And then you have arrows telling you where you can go to get from point A to point B. And now these do not have a movement point cost. They have an MT and an MP. I don't know what those mean. Again, there's not a good map key. By the way, I handled the rivers and bridges correctly, even though they're not on map key. Yeah, I'm getting people who are complaining, saying, wow, there's a reasonable amount of errata and everything. You should go look it up. Everything everything that gets pointed out, I'm like, yeah, I figured out the right answer. So I just don't feel inclined to go around looking shit up. And by the way, this is, I don't remember which, I don't know how they decide edition numbers and whatnot, because there's a big jump of them. This, I think, is edition 6, and edition 7 has come out since then. To me, when I saw edition 7, I thought this is the second edition, because the others apparently weren't ever printed or anything. And I don't know. Anyway. Shit, my eye is really fucking me up. Where are we? The blue area is on the map board. That's completely, yeah. Okay. A naval unit which is in a sea zone but is not in a coastal hex is at sea. Yeah, I'm not sure that they're not at sea when they're in coastal hexes that aren't ports. I'm a little confused by the distinguishment there. There are 16 sea zones with white circles on the map board. Solid white boundary lines connect them. That's this, but also these, which are not actually connected by boundary lines. They have indications of them. 4 of the 16 are also on the map board. Okay, are they on here? I don't think so. Maybe. Got North Atlantic? Nah, I don't think so. They're either here or they're there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They say 4 of the 6 are there, but there's a 5th one over here in the Red Sea. So they can't even get that right. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 on this map, not 4. Yeah. But anyway. Are also on the map board delineated by dashed white boundary lines and the blue sea color. These are the Atlantic, Mediterranean, North, and Baltic. Okay. The Mediterranean is divided. So they changed that to 2 different areas. And then there's the Red Sea, which you probably can't use. I mean, you can use it in the scenario I'm going to play. Somebody could sail up into there by going around the world, going around Africa at least. Okay. The boundaries between the 4 European sea zones are printed in such a way that certain ports lie directly on them. Those ports are considered to be in both. Like Gibraltar, during the naval phase, the active player may move the naval units he controls into any coastal hex or sea zone within the limit of the naval unit's movement allowance. They can be moved independently without a leader. They're very much like Cav. They have 4 movement points and can move without a leader. Whenever sea zones are connected by solid white line, and I think that counts as this, a moving naval unit may make a change of location between sea zones. It must expend the movement point cost listed in the sea zone as MP to enter the sea zone. Okay, so that we know one of the numbers here. The MP is 1 over here. It's 2 over here, but there's like IMs too. I don't know what that fucking is. We don't know what all the letters mean. I've read this, but these things are not sinking into me. Exception. Movement between sea zones via coastal hexes is allowed and does not require the movement point cost. Yeah, but it requires the cost of moving along the coast. 1 movement point is required to enter a port city coastal hex. A naval unit must expend 2 movement points to enter a non-port coastal hex. If insufficient naval movement points remain, you can't do it. You may move from a coastal hex to an adjacent coastal hex regardless of the sea zone at the movement point cost of the coastal hex, which might be just 1 if it's a port hex. If this is a change in location between sea zones, all relevant rules apply. Okay. It turned into a bunch of this stuff. Okay. At the end of your naval phase, the active player's naval units may occupy any coastal hex or be at sea in a sea zone. If you remain at sea, you may be anywhere in the non-coastal area of the sea zone that you occupy. For convenience, each player's naval units may be deployed as a separate stack within each sea zone. The Fortress of Gibraltar is an English possession. It's a special port which cannot be assaulted or besieged as long as it's occupied by at least 1 army and 1 navy strength point. Yeah, I remember that rule. London and Bordeaux are inland port cities. These should be treated exactly as other port cities. The coastal hexes in which they reside can be accessed directly from their corresponding sea zones. You don't have to intervene. Naval transport. During the naval phase, the active player can transport army units. By the way, we don't know, just jumping out of the blue here. Oh, that thing's not fucking charging. We don't know if I'm going to be able to load this up via my old computer. And this is one thing the new computer had real problems with, was dealing with these cameras. So I'm left with gosh, I don't know if this is going to load up. We shall see. In fact, I'll be able to with a lot of Control-Alt-Delete. I had better load this battery up too. It's almost dead. Let's Let's try to figure out where we are and what we're doing. At the end of the naval phase, you can occupy coastal hex or remain at sea. If you're at sea or positioned, we did all those. Okay. Naval transport. That's where I was. During the naval phase, the active player. Oh, when is that? I'm scatterbrained. It is before the attrition. Interesting. So before you take your attrition, you're able to do your naval stuff. It's weird. That's going to take some getting used to. The active player may transport Army units, supplies, and English production points via naval movement. Major states' naval transports may only be used to transport their own color. Let's say what they say here, the same major state or satellite state thereof. This is important because what's not clear is what the deal is with captured ships. That is still, I think it's clear in these rules, and I really don't like the answer. It's the answer that I avoided over in those rules because it kind of was implied there too. Which is that when you capture ships, you have ships of another player's country in your stacks. Ugh. I don't think I can cope with that. I really don't. Yeah. A naval unit may... okay, here we go. A naval transport of a satellite state can transport Army units of its own or from the major state it's a satellite of. Only English naval units may transport production points. Whenever a unit is being transported by a naval unit, it is placed directly under that naval unit. Production points used to be transportable here. There's also the possibility of transporting supply points, but anyone can do that. A naval unit may embark or disembark cargo or Army units on any coastal hex, including a friendly port city, it occupies during the naval phase. A leader must be present in the hex of embarkation for infantry to embark, but isn't required to disembark the infantry. There's no movement point cost, neither naval nor ground movement, to embark or disembark cargo or units. However, if an Army unit is transported by naval unit, it cannot move in the ground movement phase. I'm going to have to mark that somehow because damned if I'll remember. A squadron may only transport leaders. Up to 10 can be transported. A transport can transport a maximum of 5 production or supply points, 2 infantry strength points, or 1 cav strength point. 2 production or supply points can be transported along with 1 infantry strength point. The transport unit can also transport a maximum of 10 leaders. Seems like you should be able to get them all. But, if you're putting 10 leaders on a single ship, you're up to something weird. Regardless of what else is being transported, the numerical markers may be used to represent production or supply points, face up for one, face down for the other. In order to transport supply points, a naval unit must have begun the naval phase inside a port which the active player controls. I assume and in supply. In order to transport production points, they don't say that, an English naval unit must begin the transport phase, the naval phase, inside an English production city. Cargo and Army must be disembarked at the end of the naval phase. They can't stay at sea with anybody. Tell that to the people who went to Australia. Oh, fuck, I gotta repair my battery. I've been being so good for a while. That charger, the weird one that, not the camera. The camera started to go bad. Oh, where are we? If a naval unit is sunk, its cargo is eliminated. If it's captured, its cargo is eliminated. And any Army units on board become captured. Naval interception. Whenever an active player moves naval unit into a sea zone, the inactive player may attempt to intercept the moving units with any unblockaded squadrons he controls located in the same sea zone. Now, those can be on the coast. They could be blockading, all kind of stuff like that. Also, whenever the active player moves a naval unit from a coastal hex to a non-coastal hex, the inactive player may attempt to intercept. Both naval interception and naval pursuit use the naval pursuit table. Well, I didn't see that. I don't see that. GCG F5, yeah, that's not going to help. The naval pursuit. Here it is. Okay, so the blockade, pursuit, and transport table, like the attrition table, is simply a line on one of these tables that actually is a table. Thank you. Not the best way to express the information. I skipped over it with the attrition because I had noticed that earlier, but yeah, this is whatever. At the instant the active player's units perform a movement that's eligible for interception, the inactive player must announce that he wishes to, and intercept the moving squadrons. The active player then ceases his movement briefly until the inactive player finishes resolving the interception. The inactive player may roll a die separately for each squadron attempting to intercept the moving units, or for an entire fleet, or he can divide the fleet up into squadrons. Nicely in this game, they get the idea that fleets are bigger than squadrons. Nations in Arms had it the other way. They called counters fleets and groups of counter squadrons, and that was... The resulting die roll is adjusted by the interception modifier, the IM. Not over here. There's an MT. There is no IM in here. There is an IM here. But there's also a +1 for the circles, so I don't know. Where were we? Fuck. The interception modifier printed in the C zone, which are not on the European ones, but maybe the MT is that. We don't know. But that might be pursued. I don't know. And by Nelson if he is present. And the result is located on the naval pursuit table if the indicated result is an I. Can't they just do a number? Okay, the pursuit table, you make a die roll modified, and you're looking for an interception versus a failure. Yeah. I don't know. I think this could have been done in a different fashion without using a line in the table. The squadron intercepts the moving units and may attack them before the active player can continue movement. The inactive player may resolve as many interceptions as he desires and may then attack the moving unit with all of those which succeeded. So you can optimize your chances of getting the right-sized fleet against the enemy. A squadron inside a blockaded port may never attempt interception. Once a squadron successfully intercepts an opposing naval unit, it may not attempt a different force for the remainder of the naval phase. Stationary interception is possible at the start of an active player's naval phase. Both the active and inactive player have if they both have fleets in the +1 box on the map, that's the circle, for that C zone, the player may attempt an interception on those units, and +1 is added to the naval pursuit table die roll for this type of interception. We still don't know what MT is. Is it the same as IM? Maybe. It looks like a modifier. Or maybe it's just nothing. Okay. If at the start of the active players both have it at a +1, then they may attempt an interception and they get a +1 to the naval pursuit table. Yeah. At the start of the active player's naval movement phase, following any of those interception, they both have to be in the circle. following the +1 interception attempts, but before naval movement, the active player may move any fleets of either player, squadrons or transports, his choice, in any sea zone into the +1 box of the map of the same sea zone. This is not considered naval movement. Fleets may not be placed in that as a part of normal naval movement. So, I don't know if you can take somebody from a coastal hex, because there are places where the coastal hexes are part of a sea zone and places where it sounds like there's a distinguishment between the two. But it sure seems easier to pin somebody against the coast than to find them out in the open sea. If a naval unit wishes to leave a sea zone, no interception can be attempted by enemy units in the same sea zone. However, if it enters a new sea zone with other naval units, those units may attempt to intercept during the active player's movement phase, taking into account the new sea zone's IM. There are no IMs on this board. Wait, there's one over here. Oh, good Lord. Yeah, well, that's the insert. I am guessing that the MT is the IM and is an artifact from one of those other, let's see, 2 through 5 sounds like 3 and 4. 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 editions that came out, and just lasted and didn't make it into any kind of corrections. Who knows? Interception can only occur with or against one fleet, including combined fleets. If more than one fleet of different nationalities are in the same sea zone and a stationary interception is attempted, the phasing player must announce which fleet he's attempting to hit. Fleet being a stack or something congregated in one of those. If combat results from the intercepting attempt, if combat results from the interception attempt, only the intercepted fleet may be used to resolve combat. All right, we're going to break here because everything's just little rules. Well, there's no real big bold things, and I can't make it through the whole thing. Again, I'm not feeling all that great. Back up here. It's like the stress levels from the computer thing are just so devastating to me. And it's not like I don't have a way out, whatever. I have another computer that works fine. I have, a better one. I could start transferring stuff. I probably should have done that long ago. But it's just like any setback feels absolutely like it defines what should be the end. It's another little piece of my comfort chipping away, and it's not going to get better. That's the whole thing. It never gets better. And I'm like, yeah, I'm up to today. I should have gone shopping. This should have never happened, probably. All right, naval pursuit. Okay, so naval interception requires the naval pursuit table, which is this line. Also, when you're in combat, if you want to continue the combat, unlike on the ground situation where the enemy withdraws and you can't really stay in contact with them, or else you stay in battle, here you constantly have to keep rolling for naval pursuit. Now there are some weird situations about this that I'm like not happy about, which, for example, if I'm trying to break out of a port that's being blockaded, I think I have to pursue the enemy to hit them again. That I may just say, screw that, man. Okay. After each round of naval combat, the victorious player is permitted to try to pursue the opposing force. He rolls a die for his entire force. If he gets an I, not a 1, he gets an interception and can then do another round of combat. Nelson's bonus applies to this. Naval blockades. During the naval phase, the active player can blockade any port. It's kind of funny because we got the port here and then the little port box here, which is potentially an interesting addition, although it does kind of add to the clutter of the map, especially in the English Channel up there. Compared to the old game, it does actually add some information, something. But you know what it does is that, like, most games that have this have kind of a port entrance box, you know, where if the ships are actually in port, they're in the hex, and if they're outside blockading, they're outside the hex. Here it's all just going to be in the little box. Anyway, I'm just griping about everything nowadays. When the port is blockaded, you have to have at least as many squadrons as the inactive player has in order to blockade. When a port is blockaded, all the inactive player's naval units are placed under a fortress marker, and the active player squadrons are placed directly on top of it. If at any subsequent time the blockading squadron is outnumbered, then the marker is removed. A naval unit inside a blockaded port may only leave that hex by running the blockade. And these rules are all in the original one way or another, kind of more condensed, I think. During the owning player's naval phase. In order to attempt an escape, you must announce which naval units are attempting to leave the hex. They can attempt to escape individually or as one combined fleet, or however you want to parse them together. For each fleet attempting to escape, you roll a die and locate it on the naval blockade table, which I'm guessing is over here. We have an F star, which allows the blockading force to actually intercept you on your attempt and kill you and attack you. But other than that, it's either a failure or an escape. A 1 in 6 chance of escaping, 1 in 6 chance of having to fight the blockading force. If the result is an E, you slip through. If it's an F, you can stay in port, or you can attack the blockading force, up to you. After resolving the combat, the active player units must return to the port unless the blockade is negated. If the result is F star, the blockading force has the option to initiate a round of combat, and then the active player's force has to return to its port. A naval unit may not attempt to leave a blockaded port more than once in any given naval phase. A naval unit may enter a blockaded port, but may not move into a blockaded port. I don't know what that means. There are a few interesting things here. What is the big F? Is that the naval? Yeah, that's the naval rules. It's kind of weird. Naval units is right here, but this is just the whole naval rules, basically. What does this mean? A naval unit may enter a blockaded port hex. Oh, yes. Okay, so if a port is blockaded, I can move into the same hex and be sitting there where I might have to fight. That's the meaning of that. And here's the exception. If a port city is blockaded, only the player who controls the port may move his naval units into that port, providing the moving units have sufficient movement points to perform the move. Naval units outside the blockade may freely join the blockaded force in the port. Whoa. Okay, so I can slip through the blockade and enter the port and maybe break the blockade that way. All very weird. And it, like, yeah, this is an exception to that. And it's like, I don't even know why it's worded the way it is. But this is the kind of stuff in the original that led me to say, oh, geez, this is just like too clunky. This is supposed to be a land war game, right? At a grand strategic level. Yes, it has a lot of detail on the land combat. But it kind of feels like the naval combat. I don't know. I mean, it's at about the same level, so it's fair, but it's obnoxious to me. I don't like naval rules. If one or more squadrons is currently blockading a port and attempts interception, the units may not be used to continue the blockade. Following the die roll, the intercepting squadron is moved to out at sea, regardless of the result and the blockade recalculated. If the blockading force is no longer sufficient, the blockade is negated, the marker is immediately removed. Combat resulting from a successful interception in such a case is resolved with the intercepting squadrons considered to be at sea. The interception die roll does not get the at sea modifier, which I think is this, which is something special. I don't know. Like, are some of these negatives? Yeah, like out here, the intercepting modifier is shitty. Oh, whoa, this one has 3. What's up with this? This has an MT, an MP, and an IM. MT, maritime traffic. Okay. This has to do with the Lloyds of London stuff. It's all a different role. But strangely, not everything has an IM. I guess they're just zeros if they're here. And this has maritime traffic. The Red Sea does not. I don't know. Okay. Hey, we actually have a key on the map for something. How about that? Right. We're not going to last long here. Yeah, I got more pages. I don't want to cope with much more. Any squadrons of the inactive player that had been blockading a port may not be used to intercept any naval units of the active player that started the player segment under a fortress marker in the same hex. Any squadrons of the inactive player that had been blockading a port may not be used to intercept any naval units of the active player that started the player segment under the fortress marker in the same hex. The units are in the same sea zone. I don't understand. Oh, if I'm I think the meaning to that is if I'm blockading the port and you manage to escape, I can't try an interception because you're still in the same sea zone. That's anything else in that sea zone isn't allowed to intercept either. So it's not a special case, but okay. And this is the kind of way the rules, they're like something that cumbersome, and it didn't actually tell me anything that I didn't already know from the rules that were much more simply written. If one or more squadrons is blockading a port and the active player wants to run the blockade with the isolated fleet and wants to bring a fleet that he is moving at sea into the hex to attack the blockaders, he must do so one squadron at a time. They may not combine to attack the blockading fleets unless the blockading player allows it. The blockading fleet may choose which of the 2 enemy fleets it wishes to engage first, and it could be more than 2. Because what's interesting here, so this is where it's ugly. If one or more squadrons is blockading a port, okay, and the active player wants to run with the isolated fleet and wants, I guess they mean blockaded, and he wants to bring another fleet in to attack. They're not able to coordinate, and they actually are not able to attack at the same time ever. They can't support each other to any degree, but they can fight two different battles. If one or more squadrons is blockading a port and the active player wants to bring a fleet that he is moving at sea into the hex to attack the blockaders, he is not limited to doing so one squadron at a time. Did this say one squadron at a time? It said one fleet. No, yeah, this is where they got squadrons fucked up. The way they talk about it, they say it has to be done one squadron at a time. That's one ship counter, right? One point of ship. Although I don't know, because some of them have 2 points on them. Are they a squadron? I don't know. But I think the meaning of squadron is 1 point of ship. And here they're talking about one squadron at a time, but then in the description of it, it sounds like that whole fleet gets to operate together. You just can't coordinate between the blockaded fleet and an external one trying to break the blockade. But then they repeat it here with that same fucking one squadron at a time. I'm going to peek at the old rules, see if it has that same horrible wording. This was something that I just looked at and I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? And yeah, it looks like a massive typo to me. As far as I can tell, this is new stuff that's not in the original at all. And that's good because I don't remember it being that cumbersome and annoying. And so this means new bad wording introduced, as opposed to stuff from 1980 that like just carried over through however many versions. Honestly, the 1980 rules are pretty decent, but the naval rules are overly cumbersome and not well described. But I always have trouble grasping naval rules. I had trouble with the Victory Games Civil War game. But that does weird shit because they're talking about river, combats on river hex sides, stuff like that, which, you know, is definitely clunky. This is clunky in ways that I don't think it needed to be. Oh yeah, so my computer's working again, which means it probably was some sort of malware on there, like, I don't know, some kind of keylogger type thing to catching mouse strokes. The nice thing about it all is now that I'm using security keys, there's nothing important that I logged into. They could like pay my garbage pickup or you know, something along those lines, but almost everything I log into, you know, through one of the federated logins using, anyway. All right, so we're on the combat itself. There's 4 situations in which naval combat happens when the active player's naval units enter a coastal hex occupied by naval units controlled by the inactive player. Okay, so that sounds like you don't do an interception or whatever. The active player may initiate combat against them. When the active player's naval movement is interrupted by intercepting naval units controlled by the inactive player, the intercepting player may initiate combat. When the active and inactive players have naval units in the same sea zone and the stationary interception, which is in that little circle box, whatever, is successful, combat can occur against the inactive player. And when the active player's naval units attempt to leave a blockaded port, then combat may be initiated. Remember, relieving the port is done, that's case 1 being in the same ground hex. So if somebody's up against the land, you can catch them automatically. Which, like if somebody's in a coastal hex. That's good, because I was troubled that it was easier to catch somebody out at sea. Naval combat is very much like land combat. We'll take a quick look here. So you figure out your combat odds, and they work the same way, larger and smaller. It's just strength points against strength points. You have modifiers, but there aren't any. Okay, here are the modifiers, I think. English fleets have a morale of 2. All other fleets possess a morale of 1. The English leader Nelson also can add 1. So basically, the morale differential is a possible bonus for the English, and Nelson is a possible second bonus for the English. You get a result. You look up the result versus the number of strength points, and you get a number. But what does the number mean? I think it's the number of damage points done, but I think there's also additional effects here, which are not... Oh yeah, they are. Here we go. So, a D, damaged, R, retreat, K is a sink, C is a capture, and in addition, you get this number result. And it's all based on the smaller force, and, well, there's some zeros, okay. So you're not guaranteed to take any losses. Oh. Stupid glossy paper. You cross-reference the result with the total number of strength points, and then you remove a number of strength points sunk or captured equal to the number indicated on the combat results table. You must also immediately mark as damaged a quantity of units indicated on the naval damage table by following the restrictions below. So what are they saying? You cross-reference with the total number of strength points. That's going to be this naval damage table. Okay. Remove a number of strength points sunk or captured equal to the thing. So a 2K would be 2 sunk. Okay. And then you'd be looking here, and that would be damages. But what's weird is, if I take a D, I'm damaged. So yeah, that's going to be the number of damages I get, is the D line. Whereas if I took the K line, I would sink a ship and take that much damage. So it's additive in most of the cases, but the number in case of a D result. I don't like when things are inconsistent, but I get the reason. It's the damage. Like, you could subtract 1 from the damage numbers there and just, keep it consistent, but that would probably confuse people too. At least 50% of the strength points sunk, captured, and or damaged must be the morale value as the force in the current round. And what that means is English ships, if they're using their morale, are going to have to take half the damage. What's not in this game, well, for the navies, is anything proportioning it between nationalities. For the armies, they do, I think. I don't recall. But you really kind of want that in a multiplayer game. Naval units forced to retreat must be moved as one fleet. A naval retreat when the combat is in the European sea zone. The fleets must move to the nearest unblockaded, friendly controlled port city. A naval retreat when the combat is in a global sea zone. The units must move to an adjacent sea zone with the lowest movement point value. If multiple zones have the lowest movement point value, the retreating player chooses. I assume there's not another interception in that new space, even though they just entered it. If Nelson was involved in a combat, at least 50% of the strength points sunk, captured, or damaged must be English, even if you're not getting the English morale. If the morale of the force is 0 as an average value, the entire force must retreat. Nothing lowers the morale, does it? That's what disturbs me. Oh, I know what it is. It's that damaged ships have a 0 morale. Now, somewhere GCG 6F below. We're not in 6, so that's actually up here, but that's like about Port City's blockaded. 6F here, or 7F, is this, which maybe is it. I don't know. After the, like, it's not telling me what the morale is for a force. Do I have, so let's say I had, you know, a couple of English ships and 3 Spanish ships. What is my morale? Can I use the 2? I don't know. I'm guessing I would use the morale for the same way I would in the land combat. Where are we? Okay. After the first round of combat, the player whose force is unaffected by the combat result or suffered damage only. This is what the victorious player. So we should always see somebody who gets either a 0 or a D, and both people shouldn't get those results, and it looks like that's the case. So there's always a winner. The player whose force is unaffected or suffered damage only may initiate a second round of combat by rolling to pursue the opposing force on the naval pursuit table. If they get an I, they get another round of combat, and this can be repeated after each round at the option of the victorious player. I don't think a retreat forces you to retreat if you get intercepted. Like, then you're on another round of combat. That's not absolutely clear, though. If the losing force is not pursued or loses 2 consecutive rounds of combat, the force must immediately retreat to the nearest friendly unblockaded port. Okay. Again, I'm not sure. Does the R force a retreat without an interception chance? The interception chance isn't that high, but it would make sense that you would have that kind of pursuit of a fleeing force. But I could see where 2 consecutive rounds of losses, maybe you get away. Although I'm not absolutely certain that that makes sense. But it's to prevent, you know, the beginning of a win turning into just a sequence of wins. But again, it's not that likely that you'll keep intercepting. Where are we here? If no unblockaded friendly port is available, all units in the force are treated as if they're unescorted transports. That's going to be a different kind of die roll, and we'll hit that in a moment. Transports don't participate in naval combat. If an unescorted transport is attacked, the player who controls the transport rolls the die and looks on the naval transport table, which I'm sure is just a line. The result is interpreted as C as the transport is captured. I think this is on each per transport. C, it's transported. S, it's sunk. E, it escapes using the retreat rules. Die roll is used to resolve naval combat. Is modified for morale and leadership. Yeah, it's +1 if the larger force is English. Whatever. And the leadership is just Nelson. Fuck, I'm tired. Damaged squadrons can be... Okay, now we're getting to some complicated stuff. So things get damaged, right? And now, instead of just telling you what damage does, they talk about how they can be repaired, which to me is sort of the last thing you should get to. But damaged squadrons may be repaired while at a friendly controlled port city. Exception: English squadrons may repair while at sea or on blockade duty. Repair costs 1 production point per squadron. Naval production points can be used. 2 or more units can be repaired simultaneously. This does not interfere with prize repair or regular naval construction. At the end of the player's production phase, you put a repair marker above the units which you wish to repair. I don't think there are any. What are these? Unsupplied. Not in here. Yeah, I don't think there are any such markers. And these are my number markers from the original game, although now they say they're siege markers. They were less dedicated in terms of the wording on them. I guess I could use a fort, an entrenchment on them as a repair marker, or I could use the back of one of these. There usually aren't a lot of unsupplied markers on the board, and they serve no purpose. But it is kind of weird to talk about markers that don't exist. But par for the course with this set. And this is new rules, right? Okay, you place at the end of production, you put a repair marker above the units which you wish to repair. At the start of your production phase next time, any units under a repair marker can be repaired at the cost, but if they move, engage in combat, or are used to attempt an interception, the repair marker is removed. While damaged, the morale level of the unit is reduced by 1 level, and the ability to intercept or pursue is unaffected. If a damaged squadron is forced to take more damage, it's sunk. So the English will never break due to morale, if that's the case, because they start off with a 2 morale and it goes down to a 1. Everyone else, if the majority of their ships are damaged, will break. Okay, naval prizes. And this existed in the other rule set too, I remember it. Captured naval units are handled at the discretion of the capturing player. Okay, this is where it's got to be careful. The capturing player must immediately destroy the prize and return it to the owning player's force pool, or keep the prize in play by leaving it on the map board. Nothing about replacing it with one of their own colored pieces. As long as the capturing player retains physical possession of the prize, he may at his option tow it to a friendly port, repair it, and incorporate it into his own forces. I don't know how I'm going to deal with, like, the British with blue ships, because those blue ships can move around on their own and everything, and they look French. That's the problem. And the old rules had the same wording problem. Maybe it was differently stated, but I remember it really catching me. Then the next thing, we can return it to a friendly port. A friendly port is a home port belonging to the capturing player's nation, or a port conquered by his national forces. Okay. A prize is towed by placing it under a combat naval unit and moving the two together at normal naval movement rates. Transports may not tow prizes. Prizes may not remain at sea for 3 consecutive player segments, even when under tow. Also, they may not enter coastal hexes except at ports. Place a siege marker above the unit and increment at the end of the player segment. If forced to remain at sea for more than 2 consecutive player segments or enter a non-port coastal hex, the prize is eliminated. The towing unit's unaffected. A combat unit may only tow 1 prize at a time. It doesn't slow the units down, and while they have a siege marker on them and are stacked under a friendly unit, then, well, it looks like it's dawn. Fuck. I was supposed to go shopping today, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I was supposed to go yesterday. I slept until it was dark. But I'm fatigued from the computer shit. But anyway, I don't have a problem with the wrong color being present during the towing. But I do have a problem with you sailing away with the wrong color and then keeping that wrong colored ship as new, bigger force pool. That feels like what is being asked in here. But I gotta tell you, if it does change the force pools, here's what happens. If I lose a ship due to it sinking, I can rebuild it. The English can build all their red ships, so don't worry about them. But with any other nation, if I lose a ship, I can rebuild it. It goes into my force pool, and I can start paying to build it. If I lose a ship to capture, somehow or another, my capability to build ships has been impacted. I mean, the ship's destroyed. It's at the bottom of the sea. The men on it are dead. I don't see a difference between capture and sinking. I do see a difference between I do see that you can't just continuously build your navies, although I think you should be able to. But anyway, I don't feel like force pool really affects navies in the same way as it makes sense for land units. So where are we here? Once in a friendly port, a prize may be repaired. To move a prize before repairs are effected requires towing. Each captured combat naval unit requires a payment of 3 production points. Yeah. So they're handling, first line is about towing, and then we go to the repair, and it's like, what the, it's just not, it's not written coherently. Each captured combat naval unit requires a payment of 3 production points. Now remember, it costs what, 1 to repair a ship? Normally? No, it actually, wait. Costs specified above. Repair costs 1 production point per squadron. Yeah. So repairing a ship is cheap. Converting a captured ship is a bigger expense. Where were we here? And somewhere or another, this activity does not interfere with prize repair or regular naval construction. But there is some, I don't know. I think it just takes production. Okay. It takes 3 full months to repair. Put a siege marker above the unit. I had to have a siege marker while I was towing it. Now it gets a different, oh, that's ugly. An increment at the end of the player segment. Transports cost 1 production point and take 1 month to repair. A prize may be paid for in the installment plan. Somewhere or another it was 3 production points in 3 months. Now, I don't know what the production cost is of a navy. It was high in the original and could be done on the installment plan. Only 1 prize may be repaired at a time. Thus, if 2 combat units and a transport were captured in the same turn, it would take 7 production points and 7 turns in friendly ports to repair them all. The repair of prizes in no way conflicts with the construction or rebuilding of naval units. Once a prize is fully repaired, it becomes in every way equivalent to the owning player's other naval forces. Now, that is the one line that makes it sound like maybe you swap out and put a counter in there. But I don't know. Because it does cause some issues. If let's say I'm the French, who can't build more than their force pool worth of Navy units. If I capture an English Navy unit, and then I lose a naval unit, the naval unit I lose goes into my force pool. So I've expanded my force pool. I'm less upset about that. Naval victory could, captures and whatnot, it could make sense that I become more active in my navies. What doesn't make sense is that my force pool is reduced because I lost a ship to capture rather than sinking. And the really horrible thing, which is the wrong colored ships sailing around under the control of someone else. I mean, there are some control flags and stuff. They're meant for the towns. Okay. Prizes may be recaptured at sea. No capture is possible in ports. You can't sail in and attack a port in this game. Even if recaptured by the original owner, such must still be repaired in order to be incorporated into their active force. Replace the siege marker and set it to 1. Squadrons, okay, now we're back to towing. Squadrons towing a prize have their morale reduced 1 level for combat purposes. Towing squadrons may jettison their prize just before combat to avoid the penalty, but the attacking player then enjoys the option of either continuing the attack or breaking off and retrieving the prize. If they do engage in combat, the victor obtains possession of all the towed prizes, which take no part in battle, as well as any others he may have captured in the course of the combat. Prizes cannot be bought, sold, traded, or bartered among players. This is reduced by 1. Okay. I was not lying. All right. Nelson. Nelson has no effect on land combat. He increases the die roll by 1 if he's aboard a naval unit attempting to intercept or pursue the enemy. He adds his combat and pursuit value to the whole stack of naval units he's with. If squadrons attempt to intercept individually, each one is allowed to receive this bonus. So he can coordinate them even if he's not there. He's got really big flags. If more than 1 English squadron is at sea in the same sea zone, all are considered to be with Nelson if he's present. He's killed if all the naval units with him are sunk. He's captured if all of them are captured. What if some of them are sunk and some are captured? I don't know. At the end of each naval combat, I just don't know. At the end of each naval phase, Nelson is handled like any other leader and is subject to injury, except instead of having to roll a 12 to have to make an injury roll, he has to roll an 11 or 12. But he still is probably not going to be dead. He's just more likely to get killed. Yeah, given the amount of injuries he had. Should be higher. For purpose of naval combat, the die roll is increased by 1 if the larger force is accompanied by English leader Nelson. Yeah, we talked about that. He's the only leader that affects naval combat. He may not move across land. He can only be moved with a naval unit. Naval sequence of play. Okay, this is because of the interceptions and whatnot. The active player moves each naval unit or stack of naval units separately. When he finishes moving that unit, he may move another. A moving unit can pick up another unit during its move, but the picked up unit must move at the rate of the original, i.e. it expended all the movement points that the stack expended already. If 1 or more naval units of the active player moves into a sea zone and is intercepted, that combat shall be completed before any other combat or movement. If the active player's force is victorious, it may continue moving or follow the defeated units back to port and blockade if it has sufficient naval units to do so. The victorious naval units also remain where it was intercepted if the controlling player so wishes. That's the naval rules, not the naval production. In the original game, and I think it's still the case, we have this blue space here. That's a special production city that only produces fleet points. I think I get the naval system, maybe better than I ever did before. Reading it aloud to you helps. Yeah, there's the dawn happening. I don't know, can you even see it? Like, I look in the camera and I'm not getting the colors. Cameras give you good, supposedly with the, I really should try it sometime, although I don't think I can see it here, with the Aurora. But, yeah. Anyway, sorry for the struggle going through it. I just felt like I needed to go through it because a big part of this upcoming scenario with the optional rules includes the navies. And in fact, they're the reason that, this scenario is probably included, to give a quick primer on naval operations.